At the close of the 19th century, the study of physics was a backwater. In the universities of Europe, it was widely accepted that all the important laws of nature had been discovered. Theories of electromagnetism, thermodynamics, and mechanics seemed to explain everything. No one could foresee that there was a scientific revolution looming. Even less, that one of its leaders would be a poor young woman from Poland who had just enrolled in the physics faculty.
Leave your home, change your name, live alone.
In the spring of 1891, Maria Skłodowska arrived in Paris. She found herself in France at a time when there was some ill feeling towards foreigners. So to better fit in, she changed her name to the more Gallic-sounding Marie. Her university, the Sorbonne, was one of the few elite European academic institutions that admitted women. In Britain, it would be the 1920s before Oxford and Cambridge allowed women degrees. She excelled, graduating first out of her entire year in science. But life was hard. After paying rent for her tiny garret room, she had very little left over for food or fun. If she was to stay in Paris, she needed a job.
She worked on magnets. She carried out lots of very precise research on exactly what alloys you use to make a very powerful, very permanent magnet.
Now she needed a lab in which to work. And thanks to some shrewd matchmaking from a fellow Pole, she was about to meet lab owner and expert in magnetism, Pierre Curie.
When I came in, Pierre Curie was standing in the window. He seemed very young to me, though he was aged 35. I was struck by the expression of his clear gaze and by a slight appearance of carelessness in his lofty stature.
30 years later, she remembered that very first moment that she saw him across the room, and she was terribly struck, so I guess it was love at first sight.
She moved into the corridor of Pierre's lab at École de Physique et Chimie and set to work. Here, an extraordinary romance unfolded.
He caught the habit of speaking to me of his dream of an existence consecrated entirely to scientific research, and asked me to share that life.
Marie had her doubts. She was homesick and missed her father. But Pierre pleaded with her to stay and make her life with him in France.
Am I to be the one to hold you back and make you come my way? I know I'm the only one to do.
Being born.
Indeed, just weeks after the birth, Marie published her first scientific paper. It was an important work which quickly spread around the world, standardizing the manufacturing process of magnets. But soon after, she abandoned all work on magnetism because she'd heard of a stunning new discovery, one that would be the making of her as a professional scientist. It was now 1896, and another Paris-based physicist, Henri Becquerel, was exploring the properties of uranium. Finishing work early one day, he placed his materials away in a desk drawer, leaving a nugget of uranium on top of a sealed photographic plate. When he opened the drawer the following day and examined the plate, he saw that it appeared to have been exposed to a bright light. Serendipity had led Becquerel to the discovery that uranium was emitting unknown rays that could pass through solid matter.
Nobody had any idea what it was. It was not seen as a particularly fruitful research topic, which is probably why she, as a Polish woman, was enabled to pick it up, because there wasn't a lot of competition for it.
But after publishing, Becquerel promptly gave up on the strange new rays, leaving the field clear for the Curies. But how to measure these invisible rays? Marie needed something more sensitive than a crude photographic plate. Fortunately, she'd married a brilliant electrical engineer, and he designed a way of accurately measuring the strength of any potential source of these rays.
So this instrument is called ionization chamber. As Marie Curie did, we just have to put our sample between the two metal plates.
Marie continued to work at Pierre's apparatus until one day, whilst testing a substance called pitch blende, she got a result that sent the electrometer off the scale. This was the highest reading anyone had seen, and since it was so much stronger than uranium, it must be coming from an entirely new element. The question was, what was it?
There's this marvellous caricature that came out in Vanity Fair, and there's Marie Curie and Pierre Curie in Man of the Year, and he's there and he's holding up this great big test tube, and the radium is shining out onto his forehead, and so his forehead is glowing with genius, and she's this little diminutive figure behind him with her hand on his shoulder, sort of peering over him, and you can almost hear her saying, "Oh, Pierre, you're so clever," you know. And so all the glory of the discovery is being attributed to him, even though it was very much a collaborative piece of work.
The years of toil had paid off. In 1903, the Nobel Committee decided to honor the discoverers of radioactivity. But in a blatant show of sexism, the committee only nominated Henri Becquerel and Pierre. Marie was ignored. Pierre responded that if this nomination was serious, he could not accept the prize unless Madame Curie's name was included. The committee was forced to relent, and all three shared the 1903 Nobel Prize for Physics.
We have been awarded half of the Nobel Prize. We are inundated with letters and visits by journalists and photographers. And yesterday, an American wrote asking permission to name a racehorse after me.
The Curies were on their way to scientific stardom, but their health was beginning to suffer from the years of exposure to radiation. Pierre was feeling especially unwell as he left Marie on the 19th of April 1906 for a series of appointments in Paris. Slowly, Marie emerged from her pain. 7 months after his death, she took on Pierre's professorship at the Sorbonne, supported by her closest friends. One of whom, Paul Langevin, had been Pierre's student. He too was unhappy, trapped in a loveless marriage, so it was perhaps only natural that the two became close. They were together when Marie's name was put forward for a second Nobel Prize in chemistry, in recognition of her work isolating radium and a second new element, polonium. To this day, she is the only person to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 different sciences. And so it was that she found herself sharing the wonderful news with Paul at the Solvay conference. She'd made it to the top table of physics. But her union with Paul was doomed. Although in an extraordinary twist, this would not be the last Curie-Langevin relationship. Because 2 generations later, Marie's granddaughter married Paul's grandson. And to this day, her grandmother's affair remains a raw subject. To take charge of her own destiny. Rather than work in someone else's lab, she would build her own. She designed her Radium Institute to be a state-of-the-art laboratory built around a charming little square where she could indulge her love of gardening. Here she planted many of the trees and roses that grow to this day. But her peace did not last, because on the 3rd of August 1914, Germany declared war on France. Fearful of a German invasion of Paris, many fled the capital. Marie, however, stayed, though all work on her new institute stopped. As the war began to bite, Marie learned that lives were being lost because the entire French army had only one X-ray station. So in a moment of organizational brilliance, she conceived the idea of mobile X-ray units, small cars adapted to carry their own generator and lightweight X-ray equipment. To help the war effort, Marie taught herself to drive and took the so-called Petites Curies to wherever they were needed, where she'd unload the equipment, hook up the generator, and activate the X-ray machine with little or no protection from the rays for herself. But she desperately needed more technicians, so she brought her elder daughter to the front.
Didn't actually discover radium because she was, doing science for science's sake, like men do. She was doing it because, of course, she wanted to rid humanity of cancer, like any good mother would want to, and this is really why she discovered radium. And so this is the publicity that Curie walks into when she comes to New York in 1921.
Marie began a series of public engagements that Missy had laid on that would last for 8 weeks.
The program seemed very intimidating. It was assumed that I would not only attend a ceremony at the White House, but also visit many universities and colleges in several towns. Some of these institutions had contributed to the fund. All desired to offer me honors.
On the 4th of July 1934, Marie Curie died, aged 67, with Eve by her side. Her doctor gave the cause of death as aplastic pernicious anemia. Her bone marrow had been injured by the long accumulation of radiation, so it seemed her child, radium, had killed her. She was buried in this cemetery just outside Paris, where she shared a grave with Pierre. Then she was a different kind of martyr. Her life ended prematurely, like so many others, as the result of her efforts in the Great War. At last, France had made it up to Marie Curie. This brave, brilliant Polish scientist, so cruelly shamed in life, had received her adopted country's highest honor.